Sorry, every time I get a wrong number, somebody FaceTiming in. How weird is it when people dial the wrong number and it's to a famous person? Because it was a FaceTime call from some unknown number. I'm sure it wasn't anybody I know, and I took the call, but they hung up. Uh, all right, let you guys get back on here for a second. What was I saying? I'm sure it was very fascinating. So I've been hearing from people that my periscopes, once they're saved, the audio doesn't work. Has anybody had that problem? Oh, about manslaughter. All right, so here's what I was going to point out. So the protesters are fighting the Trump supporters. Trump supporters, let's say mostly Republicans. Republicans got a shitload of guns. Republicans, they got some serious guns. Guns, 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 guns. All right? Republicans are getting the shit beat out of them all over the place, and they feel like Americans walking around and outside the green zone in Iraq lately. And none of them have fought back yet. None of them. Can you think of any? So there have been examples where, to be fair, both sides have caused trouble, both in the election process and now. So there are always troublemakers on both sides. But have you seen any Trump supporters go get their gun and come back and kill the people who are beating them with sticks? It just sort of hasn't happened yet. And I'm not sure that it will happen. So when I say that somebody's definitely going to get killed, that's more of a heat of the moment thing that, somebody hit somebody with a stick a little too hard. Somebody pushed somebody and they fell and hit their head. So somebody's definitely going to die in all this bullshit. I think the odds of that are close to 100%, because it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. But what you don't see is the other side with all of their guns, strapping on their pieces and walking out in the street and saying, okay, we're done now. And I don't think they should, by the way. Patience does have a limit, but aren't you a little bit impressed how good it is? I mean, as long as we're, talking about bad stuff all day long, we might as well, every once in a while, take note, some silver linings, right? One of the silver linings is that the Trump people are not fighting back. Now, does that sound like Nazis? Really? And by the way, I think the Trump people, and probably because of me, feel sorry for the other side. Even when they're being violent, it does look like a type of temporary insanity, doesn't it? There's this great video I saw today. It was a viral thing going around of I think it was a NYU professor screaming, kind of crazy screaming at the police for not doing enough or something. And I've seen other videos like that, and it does seem that people are actually insane, like temporarily insane at the moment. And I think that's a big reason that the Trumpers supporters are not fighting back in a way that you might have expected. Because I think people have a bit of pity for them. Even they do seem to be suffering. They are our fellow citizens, right? Or I guess that's sexist. At least they should be fellow citizens. Shouldn't that be? I don't know if anybody's calling that out as sexist, but it should be, right? Shouldn't there be another word for that? So our co-citizens, there's no other word. So there does seem to be some sympathy for the fact that the other side is having a mental problem. This is a genuine mental problem, and it's a big one, and I would call it a mass delusion, but it is a mental problem. I think it's temporary, but maybe not. So my best explanation for why the violence all seems to be on one side is that the the other side, the Trump supporters, look at them with a little bit of pity, um, because they are actually temporarily insane. And we understand why, right? Because they didn't expect to be in this place. They thought that they had all of the power and that their political correctness, progressive ways were the way of the future, and that it was just sort of a straight line from where they were to more of what they like, I guess. And instead, it completely reversed, and it reversed unexpectedly to them and suddenly, and it just triggered them into this massive cognitive dissonance thing where they believe they're living in some kind of Hitler 1930s Germany. Uh, so I think pity is the correct response. Now, I know we're all human, and I don't think that people have infinite patience, all right? But I'm impressed, okay? So far, I'm very impressed at the Trump side for their restraint. Nobody's reporting on that, of course, because it's the story of something not happening. The longer that the Trump supporters go not shooting somebody, it's going to be hard to ignore. How do you deal with it? So the question is, what do you do about everything? Well, make no mistake that at the moment the Trump administration is taking full advantage of this mental health situation. One of the things you have to either hate or love about Trump is that he's completely honest about, at least in this one way, he's completely honest about taking advantage of every leverage, every opportunity, every opening, because he sees the world as an ongoing negotiation. And we have this weird situation where half of the world is flipping out and becoming, or half of the United States is flipping out and becoming, just becoming crazy over the Trump administration. He's sort of using the opportunity to do this flurry of executive orders and changes and stuff that they just sort of can't keep up with. I think that's the OODA loop or whatever they call it. But yeah, it would be a ratings bonanza. Uh, Deny ISIS of its oxygen. Well, I don't think that's the plan. I think right now he's just taking advantage of the fact that if he does a ton of stuff, it'll be easier than if he tried to do one thing, which I love about it. Imagine if suppose he got into office and he said, "I'm going to do this one thing," and no matter what it was some Republican policy that the other side didn't like. All the attention would be to that thing, and it would be impossible to it'd be impossible for him to do it because the world would melt down. They'd focus like a laser on this one topic. But instead, he decided to do 100 things, and nobody can catch their breath long enough to. I mean, the other side is so breathlessly complaining about stuff that they're out of breath. Yeah, as long as these protests are taking place, there's less attention on the Trump administration. So I think he benefits from these. I hate to say. There's obviously some limit. If it went too far, nobody would benefit. Thoughts on the Iran sanctions? Is that new? Did something happen on Iran sanctions today? Yeah, I heard about Kellyanne Conway talking about the Bowling Green massacres that didn't happen. Um, Here's my thing. Whenever I have the same reaction when Gary Johnson said he didn't know what Aleppo was, or when George Bush Sr. said he didn't know what a carton of milk costs. Uh, it's kind of normal for a normal human being who's getting no sleep and dealing with probably the most complicated situation in the world that you would just remember some stuff wrong. Uh, Meant Bowling Green terrace. Yeah. Um, yeah. So it was just simple misspeak or mismemory. It doesn't matter which one it was, right? It's not terribly important on any dimension. So Milo Yiannopoulos has managed to be the most important speaker in the world without actually being able to give a speech. Uh, you know, if you were to ask right now, who is the most important, not most highly paid, but who's the most important public speaker in the world today who isn't Trump himself, it's Milo. And he doesn't even have to speak. He just has to threaten to speak. And and shit breaks out and there's riots and stuff. Um, yeah, most influential. Book sales up 1,600%. Yeah, you don't have to like anything, about his message or anything else, but you have to love the fact that he's having so much influence, and he's doing exactly what he plans to do. I, uh, I love the fact that the Berkeley mayor is so underinformed, called Milo a racist, and then somebody immediately tweeted that his boyfriend is black. It's like, yeah, he's a Nazi racist. And within 10 seconds, somebody tweets, he's gay immigrant, and he's dating a black man. That's sort of the end of the story, right? Talk about closing down an argument. Milo, he's a Nazi racist and a gay immigrant dating a black man. It's kind of the end of the story, right? And by the way, um, why is it? And I love Milo just confuses everybody about everything. Just the fact that he could be on the Republican side is just blowing people's minds, and they literally can't handle it, which I love about him. I mean, he obviously loves the provocation and the controversy and the attention. His mom is Jewish. He's got everything going for him. Yeah, calling Trump daddy is. He's already gay. But is it my imagination, or every? Uh, well, I'm gonna change my topic here for a minute. Should colleges get money taken away? I don't know enough about that topic. I'm not sure where they get their money or how that works. Um, all right, I think I'm gonna go do some work this morning before everybody wakes up. All right, so remember my prediction. The fake news for the coming week will be that Steve Bannon read a book and he was hypnotized by the book to want to create World War III. So that's the fake news for the coming week. So watch that. Watch everybody repeat it. He's the manipulator. He's the man behind the man. I think they had to go for Steve Bannon because Trump was just too bulletproof. You just couldn't get at him. They tried everything. I mean, look at all the things they threw at Trump, and all it ended up with is he became the president of the United States after all that. So that I think they're finally thinking, hey, calling Trump bad names is not having the good effect that we hope for. Uh, oh, you did read it. Interesting. I feel like I have to read it now. Damn it. I didn't really want to read it. I wanted to read the summary. Spencer will go to Berkeley. Well, that would be provocative. Will Bannon have the same Teflon that Trump has? Yes. I think this is where they are wrong once again. I know it's a surprise that they're wrong, given that they've been wrong 100% of the time for a year. But in my view, Bannon would be even more bulletproof than Trump. It seems to me. Bannon the cannon. um, a barfly. That's only funny because the word is funny. He's a Breitbart. I'm not sure he's a Breitbart disciple. Isn't Breitbart more of a disciple of his? Oh, in Australia they're saying. By the way, do we have any clarity on those phone calls? So I saw something on the internet that said that um, Trump Trump didn't really have any problems on his call with Mexico, so that the thought that he did was just fake news. I don't know if that's true or not. I wasn't on that call. But has there been a transcript or recording of the actual phone call with the Australian Prime Minister? Australian PM said it was a good call. So is all of it fake? No transcripts, a few bits. Uh, oh my God. Are you telling me that both stories were fake? That the Australia said, yeah, no problem. So the thing that I predicted yesterday is that Australia, they don't really have an option of being friends with, of getting along with the United States. Yeah, and I'm not saying because we're going to make them. I'm just saying that in the real world of today, they are an island, and they're sort of floating out there, surrounded by people who are not Australia, if you know what I mean. So, if you were an island nation, um, wouldn't you want to have on your side the strongest military in the world? Because I don't know how strong Australia's military is relative to their population and their size, but I got a feeling there are a few militaries in the neighborhood that could give them some trouble. So I think, I think every time Trump gets in some kind of a spitting match with an ally who requires the United States for protection, literally, that that problem's going to get solved because we're not gonna give up connection with such a long time ally. It's just not going to happen, and they're not going to give up on us because they need military protection. If not immediately, then sometime down the road. So these are um, when we have a fight with Mexico or Australia, I think you have, or even if it's Israel or any of those countries that we have a long history with. Those are mostly like sibling fights, meaning that siblings can get really mean to each other, but in the end, you're going to protect your sibling over a stranger. So, we can fight all we want with Australia, but there's only one way that ends, right? The only way it ends is we're friends because they're basically like siblings to us. Many vassals? No, I wouldn't call them vassals. Am I speaking in the key of F? I'm trying to get close to it. Trump versus Schwarzenegger, that's just a sideshow. Good for ratings for Schwarzenegger's new show. They think he's a loose cannon. So here's my take on the loose cannon stuff. So the thing that worries people the most about Trump, maybe the most, it's one of the top worries about Trump, is that he's impulsive and thin-skinned, and he'll make a rash decision about something, blah, blah, blah. And I accept all of those things to be true. I accept that he'll make, quick, rash, bad decisions all the time. But I'm pretty sure he knows the difference. I mean, all that evidence is between, conversations with somebody in which nobody gets killed and he said the wrong thing and people get excited and it's a headline for a day and then nobody cares a week later. I think he knows the difference between that and launching a nuclear, preemptive strike against China or something. SEAL got killed. Um, so, yeah, every time a president gets either credit or blamed for a military action, it's never fair. Poor Jimmy Carter got blamed because the military didn't know their helicopters couldn't fly in the situation that they were sending him. There was too much sand or whatever. Jimmy Carter didn't know that. He had to depend on the military to tell him this thing would work, and then it just didn't work. So he gets blamed, and probably cost him. Then Obama decides to go after bin Laden with unconfirmed information. Apparently it was pretty good information, but it was unconfirmed, and they probably get unconfirmed reports like that fairly often. So he goes in, Obama goes in, and he gets bin Laden, and everything works out. They lost one helicopter, it could have been worse. All right? So Obama got lucky. So now he's the guy who got bin Laden, and he's so brave, and he's so smart, and he's so wise. But really, sometimes military action works, and sometimes it doesn't. And you're always guessing. You're always saying, okay, if I send these people in, some of them are going to get killed. So the fact that there was a recent action and somebody did die, it's easy to say the president should or should not have done it. But the fact is, all military action is dangerous, and nobody knows how it's going to go. They lost a SEAL team. Who did? Eight-year-old girl died. Obama killed. Yeah, I mean, Obama must have killed probably thousands and thousands of civilians, but he got a pass. The wall will be excused. Blah, blah. You know what I love is I love hearing people talk about how if we raise tariffs on another country, let's say Mexico, just for an example, that it will lead to a trade war and everything will go bad. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I follow the logic. You know, we penalize them, they penalize us, we penalize them, and just everything goes to hell. I can see how, logically that makes sense. But doesn't that apply to every situation, everywhere, all the time? I mean, how the hell is it different than literally every negotiation all the time? Everybody could screw the other partner anytime they wanted, and if they did, they get screwed back, and they get screwed back. The fact is that there is some kind of a settling equilibrium place, and you don't know if you're in it. You don't know if you're in it until you leave it, because everything's a negotiation. There are tons of variables, and it's entirely possible that you could raise tariffs on another country and they would not respond. Do you know how I know that? Because haven't other countries done that to us? Is it not true that, I don't know much about international trade, so correct me if any of this is just bullshit, but isn't it true that China raised tariffs on us in the past and we didn't retaliate? In other words, they just found an equilibrium that worked out for us. So why do we think that if we do it to someone else, it will escalate into the end of the world? The truth is that people all the time. Let me give you a better example. It is fairly typical for someone to have a relationship with a vendor, long-time relationship with a vendor, at a certain price, and the vendor comes in and says, well, something's changed, and now I have to add 20% to the price. And you say, damn it, I hate that 20% increase, grr, and then you pay it, because it's still easier than getting another vendor. They still have the best product. Their reason for raising the price actually made sense to you. And now the next thing you know, you're just paying more. So the idea that anytime you make a negotiated change, even if it's not negotiated, even if it's just unilateral, but it's in the context of negotiation, that any change you make that's good for you and bad for the other side will lead to this ever-escalating cycle of doom, ignores every negotiation that's ever happened in the history of the entire world. Because they're all negotiations until you reach some kind of a stable place where both of you say, I don't like where I am, but it's better than the alternatives. So that the equilibrium point changes all the time as events change. Trump has just said events changed, that immigration is a problem. Now, whether that's true or not, that it's a reason for renegotiating. And there's probably a new equilibrium that we could reach And yes, if they raise prices, it gets passed on and blah, 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 blah. But the truth is, that's true of every negotiation everywhere. No matter what price you end up at, if it had been higher, people would have paid more. And if you could negotiate a lower price, people would have a better deal. It doesn't mean anything to say that when you negotiate, it changes prices, because that's the whole point of it. Who's doing the leaking on these phone conversations? Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, treaties don't last forever, that's true. A trade war with U.S. and peso will disintegrate. In what sense? Trump leaks it strategically. I don't know about that. I don't know if it's leaks or just fake news. I think one of the stories that the fake news is trying to create is that the Trump team has chaos. I say chaos all over the place. There's chaos everywhere. So they're trying to start that story, and part of that story is that there are leakers on the inside, and they're leaking like crazy because they don't like their boss. So that would be the fake news that you should expect. Now, part of that fake news is if nobody leaks, they have to pretend there's a leaker, because you don't really have chaos without a leak, do you? So it's almost a requirement of the story that there's chaos in the administration. You can't have the chaos unless there are also leakers, because it would be a strange situation to have all that chaos and have everybody on the same team when it comes to leaks and say, no, we're not leaking. Because that would be inconsistent with chaos, right? That would be actually a pretty good control. So the media has to create the idea that there have been leaks. And how do you do that? All you do is create a fake news story that can't be verified too easily. Or it takes a while to verify. So it doesn't matter if it gets verified. It only matters that when the headlines were hot, people didn't know it wasn't true, because that's the truth that they get in their heads. Later, a week later, when you find out, oh, that was a fake story, it doesn't matter. It's already in people's heads. It's too late. So it would be important for the opposition to plant fake stories that they say are leaks, so it fits in with the whole chaos attack. Who's driving the narrative? I don't know if there's any specific individual, but clearly the anti-Trumpers are coordinated in the sense that their messages they all use the word dark and chaos, and they pretend that there are leaks that there aren't, and they, make up fake stories. Yeah, the whole Bannon is the secret president. By the way, you know why they're doing that, right? So the reason that they're saying that Bannon is the real manipulator behind, do you know why they're doing that? Let me test you. Why is it that the opposition, and let's call it the opposition media, why have they decided to go after Bannon? No, not to deny Trump credit, not to create fear, not to delegitimize, not to make him look childish, because they think he's squishy haircut looks. No. Oh my God, it's not obvious. That's why it's working. Let me tell you. Here's why they're going after Bannon. They're going after Bannon because they see him as effective, and they need to get him out of there. But here's the best part. They believe that Trump is an ego monster. And they believe that if they give credit to Bannon for anything that's happening, that Trump's ego will force him to fire Bannon. All right? So that's the play. The play is to create this public idea that Bannon is the real power behind the throne. He's the smart one, and that Trump is this idiot puppet who doesn't know what's going on, and he's just signing stuff because Bannon wants him to. Right? The purpose of that is for Trump to say, fuck this, I became president, I did all the work, I took all the risk, I'm the president. If my guy is getting credit, I got to get rid of him. because I can't have a situation where the country thinks there are two presidents. So the play on Bannon is to get Trump to fire him for, for looking like he's in charge. Now, I don't know a ton about, what's happening in the White House, who's advising or whatever, but I got to believe that there are just tons of voices that are important to Trump, and that any one of them is probably far less important than the media wants to make it out. War with Iran has dumped the dollar. Did Iran dump the dollar? Really? I got to catch up on the news. I was flying all day yesterday, so I missed a lot. Do I watch? No, I don't know what that is. All right, so watch out for the Bannon attacks, but know what it is. It's really just trying to separate him from Trump. Oh, the WenHub pitch went well. What we expect at least for the short run, as we're building up customers. WenHub is my startup you've heard about too much. So we pitched it to our first serious venture capital firm, and we got a really good response. And basically the response was, if we get a little traction, we're in good shape, and we're getting traction. Traction meaning customers. So the big venture capital guys, they generally don't really consider us investing until your customer growth is so strong that it looks like it's going to work on its own. So one of the big misconceptions about venture capital is that there's any venture part to that, because really the venture capitalists decided that long ago that they didn't like risk. So the big ones, the people who have $1 billion, the ones who have hundreds of millions of dollars to invest, those guys don't want any kind of risky startup. What they want is one that's already successful. So they basically act like a bank that's not afraid of stuff, right? If you're a real bank, you still can't invest in startups because they don't have the kind of they don't have the kind of profile that a legitimate bank would want to invest in. So the venture capitalists just became bankers, but their standards are practically the same. Different criteria, obviously, but the standard of only investing if all the risk is out of it is the same with a venture capitalist as it is with a bank these days. They just have different standards. In other words, a venture capitalist is willing to look at growth of subscribers, whereas a bank would only want to look at their cash flow. But in our world, growth of subscribers is so close to profitability in terms of them being one predicting the other, that venture capitalists have this big hole that they can fill because the banks are scaredy cats and they really can't give money to somebody who doesn't have income yet. Subscriber growth like 1,000 a week or more? Well, it just depends on the kind of product. WenHub have encryption? I don't like to answer the technical questions, but obviously there are elements of encryption, built into the internet. That's too strong a statement. Let's just say that I don't know how to answer that question without knowing the specific intent of it. How did WenHub get its name? So our CTO, Nick, came up with it. We had tons of brainstorming, and he came up with that one, and we loved it. Thoughts on giant dark circles under eyes? There's I keep seeing this is just sleep deprivation. I keep seeing a commercial about something that people like rub on their eyes and it just completely goes away. Is it Calendar Tree renamed? No, Calendar Tree was a text-based scheduling system, which is still alive. You can still use it. It's still working fine. But WenHub is a visualizer. So it's all about pictures and videos and files uh, and interesting visualizations for time. We do all the things that Calendar Tree did, but that portion of it is maybe 10% of what we do now. I don't think anybody's going after Soros. Um, you know, I keep reading about the Soros stuff, and I have a problem with it. Here's the problem. It could all be true, meaning every bad thing people say about him could all be true. But if it is, it would be one of those times when the truth looked exactly like a hoax. All right? So I know you're not going to like to hear this. I know you're not. But when I look at the claims about Soros, they look more like hoax than reality. And by that I mean, I don't think we really know what's in his head. And when I hear, so actually this is very much like climate change, the climate science argument. There's something in common here. In climate science, here's the analogy. And by the way, this is just an analogy for explaining. This is not an argument. Analogies are terrible for arguments. In climate science, people like to conflate the measurements of the temperature, which is one part of science, with the projection models. And the models are not exactly science. They're just something the scientists use. It's more like a tool. So if you confuse those things, I think you get a bad result. Well, it's not worth thinking to put things into different categories for the purpose of analyzing them separately. Because there are lots of cases where you can separate a situation and say, let's look at this. For example, in finance, it's often said that first you decide whether it makes sense, and then you decide whether you want to finance it or pay for it in cash as a secondary decision. So it's legitimate to separate things for decision making. Let me talk about Soros. Soros, like climate change, there's two parts of the claim. One is that he's funding a bunch of organizations that maybe you don't like Black Lives Matters and stuff like that. That part is probably true, because I think you can follow the money. But the second part of that is what he intends to do about, what's his master plan. That's the part that's like the climate science models. Because, I can sort of see your argument that he's got a master plan to do what exactly? Bring down all the borders? Because then what happens? I don't know. But to what end? All right, so here's your test. Here's your test of cognitive dissonance. Oh, this will be fun. Now, as you know, I try to be as objective as possible. It's hard to do, but I try to be objective. And I think that cognitive dissonance is not limited to one side of the argument. Right? So it's sort of a universal trait. Right? No matter what your side of politics is, you're having some cognitive dissonance about something. You just don't know what it is. Soros seems to be the source of most of the cognitive dissonance on the right. And let me test that. So I can test that theory right now. So if you think George Soros is behind everything, and apparently he wants something called globalism. So somebody here who knows what they're talking about in terms of Soros and globalism, tell me what the end looks like. Who's in charge of this globalized world? Because if you can't explain it, it's cognitive dissonance. Go ahead. And so this is the best you can do in explaining why Soros wants to do what you imagine he wants to do, is that something about Jews and banks and natural resources and immigration, Remember the tell for cognitive dissonance? It's something about corporate elites. It's about trillionaires. It's about killing humans. All wrong. It's about eugenics. It's about lizard man. It's about open society. What does the open society mean? You don't know. It doesn't mean anything. All right, let's get rid of the racist. All right, the one world government. Has he ever said that? Globalism is just a word. What's it mean? What do you imagine if Soros got everything he wanted? Describe it to me. Okay, because the fact that you can't do that, and the fact that there are so many different sort of explanations, is a tell for cognitive dissonance. It means that you all have, those of you who think Soros is behind it all, you have some certainty about it, but you all have different reasons. That's a classic tell for cognitive dissonance. Open borders? Why? What does that look like? Why does he want open borders? Where's his paper? Where's his paper where he described the benefits of open borders? I mean, he just wants everybody to just wander anywhere they want. Literally no border. You just walk across it. Yes, I know he was working with the Nazis. My view on people's pasts is that it can be informative a little bit, but I have sort of a 20-year rule. Anything anybody did 20 years ago has to be viewed in a different context. And we don't really know what he was doing 60 years ago. All right, so the best you could come up with for why Soros wants to do what he's doing is that he wants open borders. And do governments exist in this globalized world that you imagine? He's xenophobic. It's for profit. Do you notice that you all have different reasons? Open borders, votes, simply for profit. So you think that George Soros is trying to destroy the world to make a profit? Possibly the worst idea I've ever heard. Because you know that he lives in the world, right? He's done it before. No, he's destroyed individual countries, which makes complete sense for a profit motive, right? If you're going to try to make a profit, you want to destroy some small country and live in the other country. But the worst idea in the world is to destroy the entire world, have no borders, and then try to live in the country. Because people are going to walk across the border to his house and take it over on day one, right? Because if you take down the borders, it's going to be chaos, I tell you, chaos. By the way, we should start using that chaos word, we meaning people who are tired of the protesters, because those protesters are causing a lot of chaos. What do you say, people? Let's just start calling it chaos. All the protesters are causing chaos. Because they are causing chaos. And we should agree that there's plenty of chaos and way too much chaos. That chaos is all over the place. Very chaotic. The chaotic left. Yeah, you know why the left is chaotic? Because I don't know exactly what they want, except less Trump. Causing chaos. Yeah, if you want to. So if you're trying to use Soros as a boogeyman, you got to get your shit together, because just consider the situation, right? So most of you who are on here have probably been following me through the entire Trump saga, or at least you've tuned in lately and you know what that's about. So in terms of credibility, do you think there's anything in me that would be pro Soros if I thought that what you were saying had any truth to it whatsoever? Of course. If I thought there was any truth to it, of course I would be, anti-Soros just like anybody else. And I'm not defending him. It sounds like some of the things he did to currencies and other countries, and what was it, the Thai bot or whatever it was that he attacked. Those all sound like terrible things, and you have every right to think he's a terrible person. And he worked with the Nazis, you say, and I don't know, what really happened there, but you could probably hate him for that too. But when you extend that to, hold on, when you extend that to saying he wants globalism and open borders, so anybody can just walk across the border, there's something missing with that. Like, how the hell do you make money by destroying the whole goddamn world? All right, if you think that he's figured out a plan for making money by destroying the world, by opening the borders, because there's nobody, including Soros, who thinks that if you open all the borders, that the world is better off. Show me the book he read that says that. Show me the white paper somebody wrote. I guess it would be a white paper that says that. Show me any indication of any intellectual who thinks that removing borders makes the world a better place. I've never seen it. Have you? So when you're talking about this, he wants open borders and stuff, it's entirely possible. So let me say this as clearly as possible. It is entirely possible that George Soros is, the most evil person who ever lived. It's entirely possible. He's got enough track record that would not be inconsistent, right? But you got to come up with something better as a hypothesis of what the hell he wants that makes sense as an end state. So if you said to me, Soros wants to do this so he can be king, I would say to you, maybe so. I would say to you, I don't know that I believe that, but I would say that is an end state that you can imagine somebody would want. But if you say he wants to get rid of the borders so that he himself and all of his family can die in a horrible situation, I'm thinking maybe you haven't thought this through. Yes, he's keeping his secret Jewish aims all a secret so that we don't know his plans for destroying the world. I'm telling you, if you think he's got this clever plan for destroying the world, you may have overthought this. It is entirely believable that he would destroy an individual country for profit, because he's done something close to that. But destroying the world doesn't make sense because he lives in the damn world. He doesn't want to destroy himself. He wants to destroy other people so he can have money. That's sort of the point of it. Could it be power addiction? He's done it before, is all I've heard. Yeah, he's so old that I'm not sure he's. Who knows who's pulling the strings over there? Pensacola? Destroyed. The economics of immigration. Well, immigration is a completely different issue from open borders, isn't it? Do I understand these differently? Because isn't immigration what we already do? We're just trying to do it the best possible way. I don't know about this. I haven't listened to Sam Harris in a long time, so I don't know what he's up to lately. Drives down wages. The Chaos News Network. Can I open my door so you can come in? Sure. Global wealth tax. Yeah, I mean, at least there might be some intellectual rigor behind something like a global wealth tax, whether I like it or not. Sam Harris is happy with the Muslim ban. That would make sense. Although my understanding is that it's not a Muslim ban, but it sort of is. So I saw Nassim Taleb's piece he wrote. Yeah, let me run this by you because I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think I've told you before that whenever Taleb says something, if I don't agree with it, I immediately think I must be wrong because he's just smarter than I am. So he said that Islam is unique in its viral potential. Right? And follow this. This is actually really important because it kind of explains everything, which is what he does, right? Um, his idea is that if you become a Christian and you decide to opt out, you just say, I'm not a Christian anymore. I did that. So it's pretty easy. I just told my mother when I was 11, I'm not a Christian anymore. And my mother said, all right. And that's how I left Christianity. If you leave Islam, they kill you. Right? If you marry somebody who's Islamic, you have to convert. If you get divorced later, you have to stay a Muslim or they'll kill you. So even if the reason that you got married in the first place, yeah, not in the U.S., of course. So, and yeah, let me emphasize what the commenter said. Obviously, that's not the case everywhere. It's not the case in the United States. But that is the philosophy that that is in question. Meaning, do we import more of that thinking because thought is not a crime? All right. So let me put it this way: if we had an opportunity, let's say there was some major global catastrophe, and we could ship into the United States 10 million Muslims who are from the countries where they believe that you can't leave the religion or you get killed. But otherwise, they're completely good people. They're just religious, right? There's just nothing wrong with them except that they're very religious, and they got a problem. And let's say their world has a famine or nuclear war or something, and really there's just 10 million people, and you got to put them somewhere. So we open the country and we put in 10 million. Now, if you had 10 million just added to our country of 360 million or so, would that 10 million be enough because of the viral nature of the religion that even though in America they probably wouldn't kill somebody for leaving the religion, they might give them such a hard time that they just can't. In other words, some of them might get killed even if somebody went to jail for it. Or there would be so much of a threat of violence that people just wouldn't leave it. You would create a situation where that 10, and correct me if I'm wrong, would eventually run the country. Because people would be coming in and out of other religions, but nobody would ever leave Islam because culturally and threat-wise, it would be too hard. Now, I know you're saying, well, that's not the case now. I mean, they came to the United States and they're not acting like that at all. So if we just had more of them, why wouldn't they act the way the ones that are here are acting, which is more American, than anywhere else? And the answer is it has to do with the numbers, all right? So if 3 Muslims move to the United States, and that's all there is, and 360 million, they're pretty much going to act like Americans because they don't have any choice, right? But if 10 million move in all of a sudden, and it's the suddenly part that's the important part here, they would have a foothold that because of just the way their system works, since you can't leave Islam, and they would be marrying non-Islamic people because that's what happens. And every time they married somebody, that new person would come into the religion and couldn't leave. Whereas the other religions, people are coming in and out. So the other religions have a way to dwindle to nothing. Islam does not. So the system has built into it a viral element that just doesn't exist in other places. So when people say, hey, there are tons of peaceful immigrants who came into the country and they're doing great, and they've assimilated at least enough, so there's no problem. I mean, I can't think of any problem I've ever had with a Muslim in the United States. Um, so people then extend that and say, well, if it's worked so far, why wouldn't it keep working? And it's actually pretty reasonable, right? If something has worked for, I don't know, 100 years, why wouldn't it keep working? And the reason is it's about numbers, right? So if you bring in a small number of Muslims into the country, they're embraced by this larger culture where they probably could leave the religion if they wanted to. And even if they didn't, it's such a small number, it doesn't really affect the national character in any way. But in theory, there's some number of serious Islamic people who came in who come into the country, and I don't know what the number is. It might be 10 million, might be 20 million. It's not anywhere close to the number that we're considering. But there is some number where we become an Islamic country eventually, and there's no turning back. And I think the number is probably in that 10 to 20 million range. New number used a lot is 5%. Maybe 5% in some situations in some countries. I think it would just need to be a bigger number in the United States because our culture would be pretty resistant to change relative to some, I would think. I'm probably just being pro-American when I say that, so I have no data to back that up. All right, I'm going to go do some work. Sun's coming up over here. All right, everybody, have a good day. I'm out. Peace out.